ODaron and you and Perfect Game College Baseball. And we thank you for hanging out with us. And Hunter, it's fun because we have Eastern Kentucky's head coach, Chris Prothro, joining us. We have Gulf Coast State, a community college in Panama City Beach, Florida. He is joining us. Tyler Younger, the head coach there. And I think and I loved listening to you talk to both coaches because coaching and research and the human mind, brain, and emotion. If you're a good coach, it doesn't matter if you're coaching the national champions like Mike Bianco, who joined us last week, or if you're Chris at Eastern Kentucky or Tyler at Gulf Coast. Working with young men and developing talent happens at all ages. That's what I love about this show.
Absolutely. And you know what? There's going to be many major leaguers coming from all of these programs from all over the country. And Eastern Kentucky is one of those mid-majors, if that's what you're calling it, that can take on anybody any day. They're coming off an incredible year of 38 wins, 37 wins. I read both, actually, which was kind of weird. But I love that they broke a record in fielding percentage. They broke a record in saves. And to me, that says that you're practicing with intention. You have a disciplined core, and that is a recipe for winning baseball.
You played junior college baseball. What impact did it have on your life and your career?
Oh, I mean, I learned probably more in 1 year at junior college because there's no limits in how much you can practice. And had such a wonderful coach in Matt Daggs that taught me so much, cared about us, poured a lot into us. And for me, I think that's where I truly learned just the little details of baseball that stuck with me the rest of my career. And the principles for success is instilled through these head coaches. So this is why I love this show, Darren, and very excited to hear from Tyler Younger and what's going on at Gulf Coast.
We're glad to have you back from your World Series assignments. When we come back, Chris Prothro of Eastern Kentucky and Tyler Younger at Gulf Coast State. Hunter and I, glad you're with us on Perfect Game College Baseball. In Richmond, Kentucky, there's a program that has done great things the last couple of years, and their head coach, Chris Prothro, joins us now. And Chris, thanks for spending time with Hunter Pence and I on our unique show.
Yeah, glad to be here. I appreciate you guys having me.
Last year, 20 wins, most in that conference in the ASUN, and certainly a proud year for you. As you look back upon last year and 37 wins overall, what were one or two of the foundational moments for you as the second-year head coach of that program that you look back on and think, you know what, I can really build on these moments?
The one that's easy to go back on, and sometimes it's tough to find. If you look at it on Synergy, you can see we're playing at Austin Peay. I think it was the third or fourth weekend of the year, and we're playing on a Friday night, and we're down 5-0 going into the top of the ninth, and literally a snowstorm comes through, and you could barely see. I can't believe the umpires to this day didn't stop the game, and we were able to score 7 runs in the top of the ninth, and rightfully so. They had some guys struggle with the mound and the conditions throwing strikes because of how difficult it was. And you look at it, we scored 7 runs. We were able to persevere, come from behind and score those runs, but if you look at what we did in the bottom of the ninth, we had our closer come out and he probably threw 11 pitches and threw 8 strikes and then made 3 really high-level defensive plays and tough elements that you kind of look at that situation and go, there's something about this group of guys that whether it's the situation or the moment, they just kind of stood out, and that was something we felt like, moving forward, we go, okay, there's the foundation here of the people that are in our program that we have a chance to do something pretty neat.
Wow, Chris, that's an amazing story. And it actually leads me perfectly into my first question and kind of a little bit of what we were talking about before this whole thing with regards to the World Series. The Astros played defense and they pitched really well. At Eastern Kentucky, I love hearing that you broke a record in fielding percentage and saves. Pitching and late game bullpen and the snowstorm. You obviously had the closer that had such an excellent season. Can you talk a little bit about just that season and like, to me, how you came about having such a good late game bullpen? This, your young closer Will Bryan and the defense as a whole for Eastern Kentucky last season.
So yeah, we were fortunate when we showed up as a staff in October of 2020. Will was here, and he had a history over the last couple of years. Or the 2 years prior to us showing up, where he had some kind of freak injury situations that he had to go through and kind of come back from. At one point, he had a doctor tell him that it was in his best interest to never play baseball again. And so being able to come out of the other side of that, he worked really hard to put himself in the best position he could be from a physical standpoint, putting his arm being able to work and get his arm care and his throwing program. And he had really developed a routine to be able to answer the bell every time. Hunter, this is something you've heard before. The best way I could describe Will is that he posted, right? He showed up every single day. And, kind of going through what he went through from an adversity standpoint, thinking the game was going to get taken away from him at one point. He never really, there wasn't really a situation that he stepped in that was too much for him. So we had that in place. We had someone at the end of the game that the moment wasn't going to be too much for him. And also he was super talented because you need to have both. And we had that in place. And so we were fortunate. And then we have, a staff that has done a wonderful job from a teaching, like a concept standpoint of working with our infielders. As you know, your team defense really is a function of your infield defense. And we were really good on the infield. We're super athletic, guys that are fundamentally sound, that could do a bunch of different things, play at a bunch of different positions that, when you can throw strikes and play defense consistently, you're in most games that you play. And we were fortunate to recruit to that. And then I think we have some coaches on our staff that did a great job of developing that. And so I think this is year 3. Year 1, we broke a fielding percentage record. In year 2, we did one better. So hopefully we can keep that moving. Here we got a bunch of those guys back. So hopefully that's something a trend that continues.
Yeah, Chris, that to me is like obviously the staff and the people around you and you're at the helm, but also the players taking ownership, because defense, in my opinion, is like, how much do you care about your teammate? Because offense this is where you get drafted. But like the selflessness of like mastering defense and having a team discipline. And then also with regards to pitching and winning, you had one of the greatest catchers and he's coming back. I got to hear a little bit about him. Obviously, Will King and what he was able to do with working with the staff, holding the running game. I know he was in the Buster Posey Catcher of the Year watch for a little bit, and he, having him coming back and what he was able to do last year. Can you talk a little bit about Will King and how he's able to work with the pitchers?
Sure. Will showed up with us in January of 21. He was 17 years old. I think he turned 19 a couple of weeks ago. So you're looking at a guy that's got, over 70 or 80 games of collegiate experience catching. 300 or 400 college at bats, and he just turned 19. He's mature beyond his years. He's tough because he has to be. He's about 5'7", 200 pounds, soaking wet. So he's not the most physical as far as stature is concerned. So he's had a chip on his shoulder, I think, his entire career as far as what that looks and what he's had to overcome as far as being noticed. But he's also really, really good. He can catch. He's received block as well as anyone we've had really in our time. I think that can speak for all of our coaches throughout the course of our time and careers. He's just a steady presence and he's tough, and those guys trust him. And you've been around it when you have, when pitchers believe that their catcher is in it with them, right? That they're in it with them every pitch, whether it's from the bullpen standpoint and they're working with them, but especially, that they're really in it with them in the game, that they're invested in what their success looks like. You have a chance to really amplify what those guys are doing. And so Will has done a wonderful job of that. He's a really good offensive player too. But it starts and stops from a leadership perspective and how he controls the game from behind the plate with us. And we're super lucky to have him back.
Chris, introduce us, if you don't mind, to Tyler Anderson. Time on the professional ranks with the Angels and the Phillies. Now he comes and handles your pitching staff. Obviously, that's for you a wonderful opportunity to have someone like that on your staff. So tell us a little bit about how he found you, how you found him, and how he adds to your staff.
Sure. So we're talking about the Phillies, right? The pitching coordinator, the minor league pitching coordinator for the Phillies, Travis Hergert, and I were assistants together, 16, 17 years ago at a junior college in Iowa. And so when we had the position open up this summer, Travis reached out and mentioned a lot of qualities about Tyler that we were looking to kind of pursue as far as our pitching coach position is concerned. And the first thing he said was he's super, he's involved and intelligent as far as the metrics and analytics that are, we find ourselves talking about in this day and age of baseball, that, he is in tune with that, but he was teaching guys to not chase that. He was teaching guys to use that information to help them do the most important thing, which was get guys out. And so that was the most important thing with Tyler, is that, he's well versed in what it looks like to be a pitching coach in the year 2022, but also that he's well aware of, and the players that play for him, that he's instructing, know that it's important to use that information to help them get guys out. And then he's been a wonderful communicator. That was what Travis said, being down on the complex in Florida with those guys, being able to communicate across kind of the spectrum, right? He's got, young guys from overseas that are coming in, learning how to play catch. Even though they're super talented, they're really learning how to really get the foundation of what it looks like to be a pitcher in professional baseball or just baseball in general. And then he's got, he had 20, 22, 23-year-old college guys that had a lot of success at the college level that were learning at the professional level. They had to do things differently. So kind of being able to be successful and get professional hitters out. So he's got a lot of different, information working for our background working for him that helps him communicate with our guys, not only to help them be great for us, but to ultimately we want guys being able to be drafted and move on to play in the professional ranks from here. So he's done a little bit of both as far as that's concerned, and we've been super pleased with how he's fit in with our players.
One or two pitchers that really stepped up in the fall for you. I know you wrapped, at least competitively, with your Fall World Series right around the 21st or the 23rd. I was peeking in on Anthony Vargas and curious how he's progressing, seeing the year he had last year. But I'd love to hear from you a couple of pitchers that really had great falls.
Well, yeah, I think, we talk about two returners that are back that Tyler's been really good for. One is Michael Schuler. He kind of fit that mold of, good stuff, but being able to pitch to his stuff, use 90-94 sinker baller with some feel for a slider and a changeup that Tyler's really helped him understand what his strengths are and how to pitch to those strengths that, I think he was, he pitched on the weekend for us last year and pitched in a mid to upper 3 ERA. It's not like he had a bad year, but he's certainly capable of more. And Tyler's going to be able to help him do that. And then Anthony, we call him Shaggy up here, Anthony Vargas. He is extremely talented. And I think the numbers you're looking at will tell you that he's very difficult to hit. At times struggle with the strike zone and command, but from a stuff perspective, it's tough for guys to put the barrel on him. He's, anywhere from 90-95, can really spin at two different breaking balls at a high spin rate, a curveball up to, 84, 85 with a 2,800 spin rate, slider up to 86, pushing 3,000 on the spin. That just being able to learn his body and how it moves to be able to repeat it and get in the zone to where he could have, hopefully, I don't know that he's Will Bryan. Will Bryan might be a once in a every 10-year type pitcher that we had over the last couple of years, but he's certainly capable of helping bridge the gap between Will and to the next, back end of the bullpen success story we have here.
Wow, that's definitely exciting stuff. And I want to dive a little bit more into that pitching development and what you were talking about. But I was fun to read about the World Series, the Fall World Series, and your recruiting class, was ranked really high this year for Eastern Kentucky. And I don't remember if Max Williams was with you last year or not, but can you talk a little bit about what he was able to do? I believe he was tearing the cover off the ball and what he's looked like this fall for you.
Yeah, so Max is one of the few that have been one of this. This is year 3 with him, being in our program. He was here when we showed up. He was a preferred walk-on player from right up the road in Lexington that has really made himself into a great player. We were laughing at Scout Day. He was talking. A couple of scouts kind of knew him from being around locally that they were wondering what he would run in the 60. And I said, Max, what did you run the last time you ran? He goes, I ran a 6.7. I said, okay. He ran a 6.7 at Scout Day. And I said, what's the difference in weight between the last time you ran it today? He said he's 50 pounds heavier than he was
50?
4 years ago. 50. He's gone from he's 5'9", 195. When he showed up here, he was 5'9", 145. And so he's really over 3 years committed himself to the weight room. And he's a guy, he's got some thunder in his hands for a smaller guy. I would not surprise me. I think he hit 7 or 8 home runs as a freshman and a sophomore. You're looking at a double-digit perspective, potential double-digit home run guy that, again, Hunter, you probably know this as well as anyone. The self-made players are the ones that really make the most impact, and Max has worked his you-know-what off to turn himself into a really nice college player,
Absolutely. And, it's kind of how I felt because nothing I did looked good. And it was on me to put in the work, and you got to root for those guys and to see them have that kind of fall. It's exciting. Put on that kind of weight, stay the same speed. It's going to be exciting to watch him going forward. But can you talk about a couple of the recruits that came in? These big, you obviously talked about Vargas, but was there anyone else in particular that has some big potential? Maybe not even this year, maybe this year. But yeah, I would like to hear a little bit more about that recruiting class.
So there's I guess somewhat local. He's from the Louisville area, which is about an hour and a half away. His name is Luke Reed, and he's kind of done the road, not less traveled. He went to junior college in Florida and then Mississippi before he came back home with us. He's up to 96 in the bullpen, a couple of different breaking balls, can spin it. Has a very usable at times plus split that, he could fit in the back end of the bullpen. He could certainly fit in our rotation. He's a hard worker. He's made of the right stuff. And he had a really good fall, and we expect him to really help us. And the other one, if we, kind of know we're probably crunched for time, we've got a youngster. His name's Chase Alderman. He's 6'5". He looks like they're supposed to look, right? Up to 94 miles an hour. Learned a slider. Coach Anderson worked with him this fall on a slider. He, was kind of more curveball-ish when he was in high school. That the sky's the limit for Chase. He was like the best soccer player on his high school team, the best basketball player on his high school team. He went out for football and kicked for the football team, and they threw him in there to run some routes at tight end and caught a couple touchdowns his senior year. He's never really focused on just baseball. So he's certainly a high ceiling. I don't think it's a low floor either, but he's certainly got a high ceiling. He works at it. He's got a high makeup, and so Chase has got a chance to be special when it's all said and done. And there's a couple of freshman arms that are like that we think we did a really good job in the state of Kentucky of recruiting, high school impact players. How big of an impact they make right away. You guys know that when you're 18, 19 years old and you step on the field with 21, 22-year-olds that have kind of been through it a little bit, it's difficult sometimes, but these guys have a chance. So, yeah, our recruiting class has had some nice recognition, which is good. It recognizes the works of our entire staff, but especially Walt Jones, our recruiting coordinator. But we've got work to do to get those guys ready for what's coming, because our conference is tough and our non-conference schedule will always be difficult based on the area that we find ourselves in and who we play.
Beautiful. And I just got one more quick one, because there was one small thing that I saw that you said that I just feel like it gets me excited. Something I think should be shared is you talked about, with your fall, you had some guys with intent behind practice, and you used the word intent a second time, intent behind mistakes. Can you lean in a little bit about the Eastern Kentucky and the intent behind mistakes? Sure.
So the first thing we tell them in the first team meeting every year, when I say every year, this is year 3, right? So we've done it 3 times, is that this is a program where, you're allowed to make mistakes. That's number one. We don't want those guys feeling like when they show up to the park every single day that they have to be perfect, because that's impossible. Perfection's tough, and then the game of baseball is even harder. So being able to put expectations on them that they can't meet, that doesn't seem fair to me. The second part of it is really, and we all know this kind of having been through it, it's tough to see it when you're 20, 21, 22, is when you lose and when you make mistakes, that's usually where there's the most room for growth. And so we don't expect our guys to get it right every single time. We expect our guys to be intentional about how they're working and to pay attention to what works, and then to be able to make adjustments when they inevitably make mistakes because of how difficult it is to play. And so that's where I think, our guys have been allowed some freedom, is to just be themselves, to be the best version of themselves, and know that when they make mistakes from the right place, or the mistakes come in the right way, that we welcome those things, because that's where the most growth comes from.
Gosh, what a great question and an even better answer. Good stuff, Chris. We're never crunched for time on a streaming show. We go as long as we want.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was.
We may be crunching your time, certainly. I just have one final one for you about the ASUN. I think people are always curious about coaches' perspectives within their conference, because that's where you live, right? You schedule tough out of conference. You do each and every year, but Liberty and Kennesaw State and Florida Gulf Coast are all names now in the RPI. And so tell us from your perspective about your conference.
Well, sure. So I was at the University of South Alabama for about 5.5 years, and we spent a lot of time, recruiting from South Alabama in the state of Florida. And so one, you get super familiar with how good the high school and junior college baseball is in that state. And then we're always running up against the Florida Gulf Coast, the North Floridas, the Stetsons, the Jacksonvilles. And then when when you're working at it, you're working at it regionally and nationally from a recruiting standpoint. And so, Scott Jackson and the guys at Liberty, they do a really good job. Kennesaw historically has been a really good program. They hired a new coach, and his staff have done a wonderful job in getting that program going. Played in a regional in year 1, as the best of my knowledge. So, top to bottom, the league is really good. And then you've got, guys like us coming into the league, Jacksonville State. If you've seen their facilities and talked to their coaches, you know that they're really trying to win at a high level from a baseball perspective. And I think that's the main thing that you can say is we have a bunch of athletic departments, but specifically baseball programs in our conference that are trying to be good at baseball. From a coaching staff perspective, they're hustling from a recruiting standpoint. From a resources standpoint, these departments are funding the programs with an expectation of return on that funding, which is, being successful in the field, that it's a highly competitive league. And I try to tell people when we were making that switch, going from the OVC to the ASUN in year one, that we better know what we're getting into, that these are real programs with real players that have high expectations of being really good. So it's been fun to compete with that. It's been exhausting at times. Our league schedule does us no favors, right? Every weekend you're in a dogfight, but I think that's what these guys come here for, our players, that they want to find out what they look like when they step on the field with some of the best programs, even from a mid-major perspective, if that's what we're considered, for some of the best mid-major programs in the country. And you get every bit of that in the ASUN, that's for sure.
Chris, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
Checking in on Eastern Kentucky, where they are in this fall. When we come back, a conversation with Tyler Younger. As a matter of fact, Chris was just talking about it. Those schools in Florida that get all the athletes. He's at Gulf Coast State. That conversation, he's the head coach there. When we come back on Perfect Game College Baseball, you're watching Perfect Game TV. I'm not trying to move past Christmas and the holidays because we've all waited for that and it's here. But February 3rd through the 5th, the College Baseball Classic is a great event. It's hosted by Gulf Coast State. We'll be down there. I'll be having an opportunity to broadcast some of those games. And the host school, Gulf Coast State, their head coach, the very talented Tyler Younger, who we got to know last year. So we might talk a little bit about that, but we also want to dive in on his program. Hey, Tyler, thanks for hanging out with us. And we really appreciate you spending time with Hunter and I, our unique show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
You at that level, at your level, play an aggressive fall. I mean, you scheduled unofficially about 18 games, and maybe weather or something took you away from a couple of them. So you're able to really evaluate in the fall. How did you, as you assess your fall schedule, which again was a busy one, how did you assess your growth this fall?
Yeah, absolutely. I like our group so far. Now we're young. We got 16 freshmen and 19 new guys total. So the fall was great, because we can practice as much as we want. You can play up to 14 dates now in junior college. So we scheduled about 18 games, like you said. So it's, from the mix between practicing and playing games, you kind of can get a feel for what you got over this 2.5 month period.
Yeah, Tyler, with such a big turnover and such a young group, and for you, what is most important for you to establish in the fall with this core, and then also like what excited you the most with as you're going through it?
Yeah, I think the most from an establishment standpoint, the biggest thing for us is, and this is a cliche word, but people use the word culture all the time. But we got to establish our culture in the fall, which for us is playing hard, playing like your rear end's on fire all day, every day. So, for us, especially with freshmen coming in, like you may have some guys early in the fall that maybe don't run a ball out, or an umpire calls a ball, 3 balls off the plate, a strike, and they're throwing their hands up in the air. So for us, those are big time teachable moments to let guys know, like, hey, that's not how we operate. That's not how we're going to play in our program. We're going to play hard. We're not going to get upset at the umpire. Stuff like that. So that in the fall, it's important for us to be able to establish that type of culture, to let the guys know, like, this is the brand of baseball we're going to play. And if not, this might not be the right place for you.
Wonderful. I get that foundation and establish the culture moving forward. And it's fun to remember, like, going back to being, that age, like, how much do you really know about the game of baseball? And so I'm sure that's one of the most fun parts of your job. And then secondly, like, the talent of these young kids. Was there any talents that you saw? Obviously you do the recruiting, but then, you get to see them on a day in and day out basis. Can you give us a few stories of some of the talent that you've seen so far this fall, and who really has got you excited going into the season?
Right. So we got a couple guys on paper that have a chance to be really, really good and maybe play this game for a long time. We got have two left-handed arms right now that were drafted this summer. Christian Hoppers from the state of Wisconsin. He's a freshman right now, and he was an 11th rounder to the A's this summer. He's been up to 96 this fall. It's more so 90, 93 with some arm side run, decent breaking ball, and he's actually starting to establish a changeup now. It's not something he had early in the fall, but his last outing he actually threw some really good ones. So it's good to see him make that progress, and hopefully he gets his name called again next summer. We also have a kid that was with us last year, Carson Dorsey, who was a 17th rounder to the Rangers this summer and decided to come back to school. He actually committed to Florida State recently, and he signs tomorrow, actually. So, he struck out 102 and 58 and 2/3 innings for us last year. So we're obviously excited to have that guy back.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's crazy, crazy numbers. I remember seeing Carson. Yeah.
Yeah, he actually threw against McLennan.
Tell us how he does it, Tyler.
Year.
Yeah, tell us how he does it. How does he get outs? Tell us about his stuff.
Well, he's got a swing and miss fastball. He's got the, some people call it the invisible, but he's got the riding fastball that he can kind of throw at your belt, and guys just swing under it and swing through it all day long. And he's actually picked up a little velo this fall. He was more 89, 91 last year with touch some 92s, and it was mainly 91, 93 every time he towed the rubber this fall. So there's a little extra velo there, and the fastball still got the good life to it. One thing he's kind of added to his repertoire is his breaking ball. Last year he was throwing it slow. It was more 70, 72 miles an hour. Didn't really tunnel with his fastball great, so that was a point of emphasis going into summer ball and this fall. We actually threw it a little more this fall just so he could get a feel for it. And he's actually throwing it's more of a slider now, and a slurve is probably what it was before, but it's more 78, 80 now, and it tunnels with that fastball better, and it kind of stays on plane instead of having that big hump in it out of his hand.
I find myself intrigued by the young man you mentioned earlier, Christian Hopper. Very intrigued because much like, and I'll talk to you about Mr. Lozama, who's one of my favorites, but when you think about Hopper and you think about Wisconsin and his talent, I'm curious how you two connected. How did he find you? How did you find him?
So, fortunately for us, through some connections, they actually saw him pitch at the area code games the summer going into his senior year, and actually had two different people reach out about him and say, hey, I think he's interested in junior college. So we connected with the kid then. I know his travel ball coach, Greg Reinhardt, pretty well. So, we have dialogue, usually at least once a month. And then he actually played for the Cincinnati Reds scout team the fall of his senior year. He went to Jupiter with them. And that one of my best buddies in the scouting world actually was on staff on the Reds scout team. So we were able to get good intel from him. And, those guys helped us, or at least helped put in a good word for us with Christian. And we ended up getting him. So we're excited to have him.
And talking about, you mentioned that he's picked up a changeup already, and you mentioned some development with Dorsey as well. And pitching development is one of the things. I was a hitter. I believe heavily in defense and pitching, but I love just hearing from some of the greatest college coaches in the nation about their thoughts on pitching development, how you take this young talent. Where did he learn the changeup, and how do you decide what pitches to add? Do they learn it themselves? There's just so many questions I have about from the different programs that are out there for you in Gulf Coast State.
Right, that's a good question. Cause you watch Christian throw; he's got I won't say it's a low 3/4 slot, but it's a 3/4 slot. And we felt like if we could get him to the inside of the baseball on a changeup, that it could have really good action. Because like I said earlier, he's got really good arm side run to the fastball. So we felt like, you go arm side run, you go with the horizontal breaking sweeper slider, and then you throw a changeup off of that, which gives you something to throw to righties. Because a lot of times, right-handed hitters, it's tougher to throw that horizontal slider to the right-handed hitter because you almost need the back foot slider to throw under their bat. So we felt like with the horizontal breaking slider, he needed something to go with his fastball to have a second pitch to throw to right-handed hitters. So we just kind of toyed with different grips all fall with him, and he finally, at the end of the fall, found one that he really, really liked. And a big thing for him is his arm speed with his secondary pitches. Like a lot of young guys, he slows the body down, slows the arm down when he's throwing his secondary pitches instead of keeping the same good arm speed and just letting the grip do the work. So a big thing for him was every day kind of repeating to him and letting him know, like, hey, you got to throw these pitches with the same arm speed. For one, the hitters at this level are a lot better than what you're used to seeing. They're going to notice your body slowing down, your arm slowing down. And two, your stuff it's not as good when you slow your arm speed down. So that was a big thing for him, more so than grip. We toyed with some grips, but the biggest thing with him was arm speed. And getting him in a routine. So it's a funny story about him in the spring. So he's really new to pitching. He's probably only been a PO for, I don't know, a year and a half or so. So high school ball, he would get loose in the outfield with the catcher. The catcher would never squat down, and he would go straight to the game mound. There was no throwing off a slope on the bullpen mound. There was no throwing to a catcher squatted down, even on flat ground. He would just long toss and go straight to the game mound. So, just getting him into a routine of, what do you do before you go out there, whether it's, plyo balls or band work or whatever it may be, and then having a good throwing program that leads into you throwing some pitches off of the bullpen slope before you go out to the mound. Like that was a big point of emphasis with him this fall too.
Wow, that's wild, and it definitely gets you excited to see as they start fine tuning those skills, getting those opportunities, and having that knowledge. But this brings me to, you mentioned, hitters are a little greater at this level. Obviously, for me as a hitter, arm speed on changeup was disgusting. But let's talk a little bit about your culture, your hitting culture, your hitting mindset, and some of the bats you had this fall.
Yeah, so. With us offensively, I'm a hitting guy, so me and one of our other assistants do the hitting. I'm big on just, hitting balls hard to the middle of the field. We don't do a lot of launch angle stuff. We don't play a ton of small ball. I mean, we'll square around a bunt late in the game if we, have to, if the game calls for it. Now, we're big on guys being able to bunt for a hit because I think that's a really nice tool, and it causes the defense to have to respect it, which – hinders their range. If the first baseman and third baseman have to play in a little bit, then it hinders their range to their left or right. And we kind of reiterate that with our guys that, hey, if you just show bunt, they have to respect it. And then, you got more room to work with if you hit a ball in the 6 hole or the 4 hole. Practice-wise, we do a lot of swing decision stuff in practice. Like I've personally tried to get away from the 52 mile an hour BP heater right on your barrel. Cause some of you learn being around this game a while is hitting is very, very difficult, and baseball for the longest time, I felt like we didn't practice at game speed. And I felt like in the last 5 or so years, that's something people are getting a lot better at, is trying to practice at game speed, whether it's through machines or doing mixed BP every day, forcing guys to make swing decisions. So we try to make BP as hard as possible from an offensive standpoint so that the game, not that the game's easier, but that you're kind of used to the game because of what we've done in practice. As far as individual player-wise this fall, we got a transfer from App State named R.J. Johnson, who has been really good for us this fall. I mean, as of right now, it looks like he's going to play center field for us and probably bat leadoff. He's an interesting one because he struggled at App State offensively. I think if you pull up the stats, I think he hit around 162 there. Not that batting average is the full story, but, so he had a tough freshman year. But if you go back and look at video, he was hitting with a big leg kick, and he struggled with some secondary stuff. Over the summer, he went to the Appalachian League and switched to a no stride, and he's really been really good ever since. I mean, he hit 320 or 330 in the Appy League, was an all-star, and he was really good for us all fall. So it's like that. I say that's a minor switch. It's kind of a major switch from a leg kick to a no stride, but that switch was huge to him, and he still has the bat speed to be able to hit balls in the gap. He'll run a ball out of the yard every now and then. He's not going to hit 20 home runs, but he will run a ball out of the yard. So that switch for him has been huge. And from our standpoint, a kid that's already played a ton at a Division I level, he had over 100 at bats there. So coming to our level, they kind of know what to expect. Although our level, it's really, really good, but they've already played a year at Division I and they know what to expect. They kind of know what it takes to get back to that point, which can also help you with your other guys too, because you got a guy on your team that says, hey, this is what it looks like at this level. That's what it takes to get back to this level. So, this is how we need to go about our work every day. So he was good for us this fall. Ethan Lozama was, that you mentioned, Darren, was good for us this fall. He actually had several home runs this fall. So he's tapping into some power now, which he had it last year and he would show streaks of it, but he had a really good fall too. And he's done a better job at being able to make adjustments within at bats instead of having, typical freshman stuff, having 2 or 3 just horrendous at bats before he catches on. Maybe I need to have a little bit of different approach. I'm seeing changes with him pitch by pitch now, because he can look. There were several times this fall where he had, he looked not great on 2 pitches to get to 2 strikes, and all of a sudden there's a 2-strike approach comes out of nowhere, and he's smoking a ball. He's a left-handed hitter, by the way, Hunter, and he's smoking a ball in the 6-hole, and you're like, oh, he's getting it. It's finally clicking for him. So, those 2 guys have been good for us this fall, and we've had some. Like I said, we're young this year, so we're freshman heavy, and we actually had some good falls from several freshmen too. So it's, there's some promise looking forward in our program, I feel like.
You answered my question, so I will thank you. Ethan Lozama, for our viewers, by the way, moved from Guam to San Diego and found Coach Younger at Gulf Coast Community College. So I was seeking an update on him. I appreciate it. One of my favorites. Best of luck. We can't wait to see you in February. Have a great Thanksgiving time. Have a great holiday season. Enjoy your family and Shannon and Olivia and all that goes into that. Enjoy your time, and we'll see you when you're grinding again in February.
Sounds good, guys. Enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, we enjoyed it as well. Gulf Coast State, Tyler Younger, wonderful conversation, and our stop at Eastern Kentucky as well with Chris Prothro. Hunter and I, thank you for hanging out with us every week on Perfect Game College Baseball. See you soon.